Okay, here we are at the 2022 draft, and we're going to welcome in the second ever pick by the then Phoenix Coyotes. We're going to go all the way back to the 1996 draft. We're going to welcome in Danny Brière. Danny, thanks for taking some time out of your schedule to join us for our draft show.
Hi, guys. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I feel like having you alone is going to haunt Coyotes fans as they see your face and think about what might have been, Danny. But let's go back. Let's relive some good memories, okay? Let's go back to the 1996 draft. You led the Q in scoring your draft year. You just tore it up. Your points were ridiculous in the Q that year. Were you reading and watching all the pre-draft predictions, scouting reports, all that? Do you have a sense of where you might go?
Definitely. I was watching, and you got to remember, it was a different era. The game was played differently. The rules that we have today weren't in place at the time. You have guys draped all over you. So for a smaller forward, which I probably weighed about 155 pounds, or I remember correctly, my draft year, it was a big risk to take for an NHL team to draft, a smaller forward. Nowadays, it's we're not afraid of that anymore. But back then, it was a big risk. And I remember the prediction had me going somewhere in the middle of the second round, maybe early to middle second round. That's what I thought I was going to go. You hear about all the horror stories and guys dropping off. Luckily enough, I was one of the good stories that went the other way. I went a lot earlier than expected.
Did you know the Coyotes had interest in you?
I did. There's a few teams that had showed a lot of interest. There's probably 5 or 6 teams that seemed to be more interested, and the Coyotes were one of them. My head coach at the time in Major Junior, Blair McAsee, was starting to work closely with the Coyotes. I don't think he was a full-time scout with them, but he was helping, and he later became a scout for the team. So I knew that he was pretty close to the organization, and he was trying to push my name. I also knew that the Coyotes had 2 first-round picks, and that was kind of my hope that they would, take a shot on a smaller forward with their second pick. But I thought I would probably fall back a little bit more. There was also the Montreal Canadiens that had showed a lot of interest, just because I was a hometown kid playing an hour away in Major Junior. I think the other teams, I think Calgary Flames seemed to be a team that had a lot of interest also at the time. But I would say the Coyotes were probably, and it was still the Winnipeg Jets. When I was drafted, I was a Winnipeg Jet for about a week until it was officially transferred to the Phoenix Coyotes. So my jersey, I had a practice jersey when I got drafted, when I went up on stage. I didn't have the regular jerseys that all the other kids were getting. I had a practice jersey with only the logo on, a black jersey. So it was kind of funny, actually. But just having a chance to be drafted in the first round, for me, that was a pretty big deal. I was a little, I wouldn't say it was a huge surprise, but I was pretty ecstatic that I had the chance to go in the first round.
Okay, wait, Danny, this whole season, this show has been focused on the draft because of where the Coyotes finished this season. It's been a rebuild. We all understand that. One of the things I want to ask is we look at a lot of players in this upcoming draft. We've talked a lot about players. As your last junior season is going, and your final season in Drummondville, by the way, or your draft year in Drummondville, people have to understand you had 67 games, 163 points. Like, you tear up the Q that year. Lead the league in goals, assists, and points in your draft year. Phenomenal. During the season, and I know it's different now because it's Twitter and Instagram, and everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows every player. Do you know, as a player, we talked about your draft ranking, but do you know there's scouts in the building, or, hey, this guy's here to watch me today? Does that affect the way you played at all? Was that something that it was a day-to-day part of your life? Hey, it's my draft year. I got scouts in the building.
Yeah, I didn't think about it too much. I mean, you didn't have social media to update you on all the teams that were watching you back then, or who was at the games. I mean, I was aware that, some of the scouts, but you didn't know if there was one scout at the game, none, or 25. Like, you just didn't know. You just played your game and hoped that, some teams would follow you. And when, at the time I was 17, 18, I had no clue how many scouts teams have. Is it one that travels, the continent? Is it, 10 or 12 per team? Like I had no clue. So you didn't know when you were being watched. So I really had no clue who was there, who was watching. The only thing is the NHL Central Scouting at one point. I think a guy by the name of Frank Bonello was their head scout, and it said that I probably wouldn't be a first round pick if it was the previous year, but being a weaker draft, I might go earlier. So that kind of motivated me, to prove people wrong. That's kind of what I went off of, to prove people wrong. That was my motivation.
All right, let's go to draft day, Danny. In St. Louis, right? It was at Kiel Center?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, so take me through that day. What's it like for you that day when you wake up? Who's with you? What are you doing up to the draft? What are you doing when you get in the building? What do you remember from that day?
I remember my parents, my sister, my parents, and my grandparents had made the trip up there. I spent a little bit of time with my agent, Pat Brisson, who's now, running CAA Sports, and, kind of directing me. I think we had breakfast all together with the different other players that they had. They had, I think, 4 or 5 players at the draft live that went in the first round. So we had breakfast together, spent a lot of time. But I was nervous. I was definitely nervous. Didn't know what to expect. Trying to kill time, doing different things, walking around the city. It was definitely nerve-wracking. And like I said, it was actually a good story in my case. I didn't fall off too much. I actually went maybe a little earlier than expected. So that definitely made it easier on me when you're waiting. At first I was waiting or going through all the big names that were, in the top 10, and you're following that. And then slowly, you're getting closer, creeping closer to your name being one of the possibilities, and you start paying a little bit more attention.
Are you talking to people in the stand? You were sitting in the stands, I assume, like they usually do, or take us inside. Who are you talking to? How are you calming your nerves when it's like the biggest day of your life, right?
Yeah, I do remember one thing. So at first you're just kind of watching early on. You're watching, the names. You're not in the running at first, but when you're creeping closer to your name, your agent gets closer to you, so he's starting to move in your direction. But I remember a couple minutes before, because it takes a while, right? In between picks, there's always 5 to 8 minutes in between the picks, and I remember following the camera, and all of a sudden the camera started turning to our direction, to our section, and trying to pinpoint where was the next selection coming from. And that's when I got a kind of a hint that something was happening around me. Seeing the cameras kind of veer towards my area, and the heartbeat starts rising a little quicker. And on top of it, it was the Coyotes pick, which I knew they had interviewed me maybe 3 times before the draft. So all of a sudden, your heart gets going, and you get nervous and get excited at the same time. And after that, it's kind of, it's like a blur. I don't remember much after that. Everything happens so fast. Everybody wants a piece of you. We didn't have cell phones back then, luckily, so I didn't have to worry about that. But, media left and right, the team wants pictures. It was actually, it was nuts there for a little bit. I kind of a blur maybe for the next 3 or 4 or 5 hours.
So before, as you're sitting there and it's getting closer and you're hearing other names, like, is there a sense of disappointment when it's not your name? And again, you said you didn't fall; you actually got higher than expected. Do you hang on every name that the announcer is reading and the GM from the previous team is reading? Or are you just waiting, and then when you hear it, like, to me at that age, is it kind of like you almost black out and barely remember it? Because I know Rich Nairn was probably there. The same PR guy was probably
right.
there with your jersey.
Yeah.
And getting up so take us from the few picks before where you're not calling your name, and then from Rich Nairn. What's that when he walks you to the stage, that moment from your name to the stage?
Yeah, I would have to say there wasn't a lot of disappointment, because I didn't expect to go in the top 15. So the first few picks, you're just kind of going through watching the names that you've watched or read about the whole year. The one area maybe that's the closest I can relate to is the Montreal Canadiens, I think, had the 18th or 19th pick. And I knew they were interested. And I was a local kid. And I remember they took a timeout. So I don't know exactly what was discussed. I knew they took a timeout, and that took even longer. And, they came in, I think they drafted a player by the name of Matt Higgins. And maybe there was a little bit of disappointment at that particular pick because I thought I could have a chance. But after that, no, I was kind of waiting. My next chance was the Coyotes at number 24, I think I went. And it wasn't a disappointment. It was actually a good news when they called my name. So I was super excited. And like we talked earlier, I barely remember Rich. I remember now seeing the picture and seeing Rich beside me. And just because I spent so much of my first few years with Rich traveling with the Coyotes, seeing the videos back, seeing Rich beside me, I was like, oh, he was right there. But honestly, it was such a blur. Everything happened so fast. You don't even realize who's talking to you. You meet everybody at the table. You don't remember any of the names. So it was pretty wild. It was a lot of excitement. I know my parents were ecstatic as well. And then you go in the suite where, Coyotes are. Well, before that, you have to go through the media room and answer questions from the media. Then they take you to a green room where you take pictures with the Coyotes jersey on. So I kind of vaguely remember all that. And then you're in the room, the Coyotes suite. You meet a couple more of the scouts and the people from the organization. But everything went so fast, and I barely spoke English too at the time. So that was kind of the funny part too. I could barely understand the language. So
just a lot of nodding and yes.
Yeah. So, and then you meet a couple of the other players when they get drafted later on. So I remember Dan Folk was drafted before me. And then you had guys like Robert Esch drafted. You had Trevor Letowski. So guys that I ended up spending a few years with on the Coyotes, later on. So that was my first time meeting them as well.
What did you know about Arizona or this whole Coyotes move? Did you have a lot of information?
That's almost nothing. I knew it was the desert, and I didn't remember much. The Coyotes ended up flying me in, I want to say a week or two later. And I remember landing in Arizona, and I couldn't believe how beautiful the scenery was. Calling my parents and telling them how beautiful this place was. It was pretty wild. I didn't know much about Arizona, and I really enjoyed it. I wish when I look back that I could have enjoyed the area a little bit more. I was young. I was so insecure about my status, just trying to make the Coyotes, that I probably didn't enjoy Arizona as much as I would today if I was playing there.
Well, Danny, just wanted to say thanks to the 1996 first-round draft pick, Danny Brière, for taking us inside the draft. I mean, it's an exciting day for a lot of guys, and it's going to be an exciting day for this show at PHNX. And thanks for taking us there, Danny, and thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure, guys. It was a blast.
We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.